This is your essential business briefing. I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up, a gradual return to the skies, but how much damage has been done to the aerospace industry during the coronavirus pandemic? Big hopes for hydrogen as a new way to fuel flying, but when will the technology take off? We'll speak to one of the startups developing a hydrogen-powered plane. Plus, a COVID-era boom in private jets as the super-rich pay a premium to avoid crowded planes and airports. Now, this June would normally have seen the French capital host the biggest event of the year for the aerospace industry, the Paris Air Show. But like so many others, it was cancelled because of the coronavirus pandemic. COVID is continuing to weigh on the aviation sector. According to the International Air Transport Association, demand for air travel in April was still 2/3 lower than pre-pandemic levels. And while bookings for the June to September period have picked up, they're also well below normal levels. Kate Moody's here with more on this. Kate, what has this collapse in travel meant for plane builders?
Well, the world's biggest manufacturers have slashed jobs over the last year. Airbus announced 15,000 job cuts, around 15% of its global workforce, and Boeing more than 30,000, or 1/5 of its staff. The crisis has spread to their suppliers, who have been forced to make reductions as well. Overall, an estimated 30,000 jobs have been cut in France's aerospace and defence sector, despite government furlough programmes, and an estimated 115,000 for US-based companies.
What are their forecasts for recovery?
Well, Boeing has said it expects the industry to return to pre-pandemic levels by around 2023 or 24, while Airbus has targeted 2025. Both giants have reported large numbers of cancelled orders as airlines reassess their needs. Deliveries slowed in 2020 but picked up in the first 3 months of this year. Airbus delivered 125 commercial jets and Boeing 77. Keep in mind that the American giant has also been held back by a safety scandal involving its 737 MAX model. Now, both manufacturers are slowly starting to ramp up production of their most popular models, and they've told suppliers to be ready to pick up the pace as well, and that could lead to a hiring boom.
Is the pandemic expected to have any long-lasting effects on the sector?
Well, producers are certainly shifting their focus towards smaller single-aisle models for shorter distances rather than long-haul routes, which are likely to take the longest to take off again. They're also investing more in freight. Global demand for air cargo has surpassed its pre-pandemic levels. It was up 12% in April compared to the same period in 2019. Airbus is even launching a new freight model to challenge Boeing's dominance in a part of the sector that has proved perhaps the most resilient during the pandemic.
Kate Moody, thank you very much. Now, aviation accounts for around 2.5% of global carbon emissions, and governments in many places are keen to reduce that impact on the environment. In its pandemic recovery plan, the French government allocated €2 billion to help develop hydrogen as a fuel source for aviation. Paris wants a carbon-neutral plane in service by 2035. Let's find out more now from one of the companies working on a hydrogen plane. I'm joined now by Val Miftakov, who's the CEO of Zero Avia. Val, thanks very much for being with us. You've been working on this technology for quite a while now. How far have you gotten towards getting a hydrogen-powered plane into the skies?
Of course, thank you for having me. Yes, we've been working on the technology for about 4 years since we started the company. We have done a number of ground tests and flight tests in 2 prototypes, 6-seat prototypes, including last year became in the UK the world's largest hydrogen electric aircraft in the air. And we're now moving over to the 19-seat program, which is starting with test flights later this year. So we are getting closer and closer and targeting commercial introduction by 2024.
One of the challenges with hydrogen is that it takes up a lot of space. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So hydrogen is a very interesting type of fuel for new aviation, for clean aviation. It's much lighter than batteries. So batteries are about maybe 40, 50 times heavier in terms of energy per unit of weight per kilogram than jet fuel. The hydrogen is actually 3 times better than jet fuel in terms of energy density, but it takes some weight and some volume to store hydrogen. For gaseous hydrogen, the tanks are heavy, so that 3x advantage becomes 3x disadvantage, but still much better than battery. And over long term, we're looking at a cryogenic liquid hydrogen storage, which will get us even better range than jet fuel.
So what, I suppose, are the challenges that we need to overcome now to be able to get from, you've talked about getting to the 19-seat aircraft, to get it to a level, I suppose, that's going to be profitable for airlines to be able to fly it. How far do we have to go to get to that level?
Yeah, so one step at a time. So we're already working on the 19-seater and kicking off the project for the 70-seat aircraft. So this is a larger engine that we just raised some private funding for. And we're looking to bring that to the market in about 5 years in the 70-seat aircraft, and then go from there. The beauty of hydrogen electric approach is that it can apply to larger and larger airframes and longer distances. So over time, eventually, let's say 10, 15 years from now, we'll see jet-size airframes, 100-seat plus, on this technology.
Airbus was telling the European Union in a presentation recently that it thinks that most jet planes will still be using fossil fuels until 2050. What do you think of that?
Well, we'll see what happens. But of course, availability of technology is one thing. So we do think that we'll be able to bring 100-seat aircraft up in the air by the end of the decade. But then we need to make sure that the fleets actually convert. So if one thing to have the technology available, but yet another to have that technology deployed across 100% of all operators. And that's what might take time. And that's where the government incentives and government policies are very important.
You've had a few setbacks on this journey. One of your planes was damaged in April when it landed in a field during a test flight. How have you recovered from that?
Yeah, indeed. And we are the company that pushes the boundaries quite a bit. And we're the only ones who are flight testing the hydrogen electric aircraft and hydrogen electric power plants right now. So we're learning the most. Some of that learning, of course, comes with ups and downs. But we are very fortunate that there are no injuries in the incident, and we're able to continue marching along with our larger engine program and larger aircraft program.
The nature of that landing, was that anything to do with the fact that it was carrying hydrogen tanks?
Not really, not about hydrogen tanks. And actually, in fact, the interesting bit about that was that the entire hydrogen system, the battery, the hydrogen lines and the fuel cells were actually operational even after that rough landing. So we didn't lose any integrity of the system. There were no leaks. We were able to disable everything right on site and safely vent hydrogen. But of course, this is part of the testing process, and we had a shutdown of the engine flight and had to put the aircraft in the field.
Now, that bad news came just after you got a round of good news, which is the huge boost in funding for ZeroAvia, including from British Airways. Is that a big vote of confidence in your technology?
Absolutely, and it's a big vote of confidence in, I think, the team, the technology, and the promise of hydrogen as fuel. As I mentioned, out of all fuels, we think hydrogen and hydrogen electric approach has the strongest long-term promise.
Give us your long-term view on this. Are we going to have transatlantic hydrogen flights, do you think? And are we talking about that in 20 years or maybe sooner?
Yeah, and again, so the short answer is yes, we will. The exact timeline of that depends on, again, the technology availability versus technology adoption. So we think that technology will be possible to have that as close as maybe 10, 15 years. But we also need to make it economical. And then we need to make sure that the companies, the operators actually adopt it, which being economical is part of it, of course, but also we need to support the operators in adopting the new technology, because if they have already a large fleet with relatively new aircraft, let's say that's 10 years old, they're not just going to throw that away. So we need to figure out how to help them move to this new technology when it's available.
Okay, and it's a journey we'll watch closely. Val Miftakov from ZeroAvia, thank you very much for speaking to us. Now let's turn next to a part of the aviation industry that did see growth during the pandemic. While most commercial flights ground to a halt, demand for private planes increased. And with some countries opening up to travel, inquiries for this socially distanced mode of transport are surging. Peter O'Brien has the story.
That there is one of the more than 50 private jets that fly in and out of Farnborough Airport every day. Here, wealthy travellers can board their plane in as little as 15 minutes after arriving at the airport. And with the pandemic, more and more of them are shelling out for the privilege.
It's just another avenue that's open to certain individuals, and there's different ways of doing things that might be that were certainly more familiar now or more apparent now because of the pandemic that perhaps weren't so apparent to people in the past. So they're just looking at other ways of being able to travel in the most efficient and safe way and risk-free way possible.
While most of the airline industry has had a terrible year, private aviation has done very well, all things considered. Essential flights for repatriation, business and humanitarian reasons have all kept the sector aloft.
As and when lockdown started and ended in particular countries, we sort of had large waves of demand. Say for private aviation, we were able to react to those demand patterns much more so than the airlines.
Now that foreign travel restrictions are being lifted in some countries, inquiries are soaring for private flights for leisure purposes too. The demand has even caused a record shortage in supply of second-hand jets. This could be good news for manufacturers in the future, but it's less good news for the environment. Clean travel advocates say taking a private jet is, on average, 10 times more carbon intensive than taking a commercial flight.
That's it from us for now, but you can watch this and all of our previous episodes back on the France 24 website. And if you'd like to get in touch with your comments or questions, you'll find me and the team on social media. Until next time, thanks for watching.